Hi, my name is Andy Palmer. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tamer and serving as track co-producer alongside my good friend JP Chauvet for Virtual Track 6, the CDOIQ toolkit. It's my pleasure to introduce the next session, the key elements of building a modern data strategy. In this session, you'll learn about models companies need in place to enable data-driven decision-making. The speaker and longtime data professional, Amy Mcnee, will share the building blocks for a modern data strategy so companies can manage, process, analyze, and act on their data now and in the future. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items. The session's being recorded. Any presentations will be included in the symposium proceedings. Video recordings will be uploaded to the CDOIQ YouTube channel 3 months after the symposium. And for Q&A, we'll do Q&A at the end. Please submit your questions to the Whova Q&A tab, and we will tackle those together at the end. With that, I'm thrilled to hand over to veteran data professional Amy. Take it away.
Thanks, Andy. All right. Well, some of you all might be surprised that as we go through this presentation today and we talk about key elements of building a modern data strategy, I'm not going to talk about technology a whole lot. I am going to talk about it a little bit. But we're going to talk about 6 key challenges that we see with companies who are trying to build data-driven organizations. We're going to look at the importance of establishing and communicating key tenets, aligning your organization, your governance, and your funding models to enable innovation, and the need to focus on driving data literacy deeply throughout your company. We're going to conclude by talking about a program from AWS that you can use to help you get started on this journey. All right, so let's jump in. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that companies are trying to use data as a strategic asset. According to a New Vantage study released earlier this year, while 99% of companies are investing in data, only 24% have actually successfully created what they would call a data-driven organization. So why is that? Well, we think one of the biggest reasons is that companies have really struggled to change their mindset to match modern technology. You can't apply a 30-year-old methodology to a modern set of tools and think you're going to get a lot of different outcomes. So in the past, we couldn't achieve agility with data because it took time to get capacity and data centers. It was really difficult to anticipate hardware requirements for analytics workloads in particular. And it was certainly difficult to run short experiments because of the long-term investment that you needed to make in hardware. So that's where technology, or specifically the cloud, has really changed the game for data and analytics, because a lot of those kinds of challenges, they go away. Now, I know cost is obviously still always a consideration, but you're no longer bound by time. You can spin up what you need in minutes or even seconds in some cases. And while you might want to have some foundational technology up front, you don't need to make every decision on all of the possible capabilities you might need over the next, say, like 2 to 5 years, like we had to in the past. Now, this also lets us bring in business stakeholders much earlier in the process so that we can fully understand the experience that we're trying to create. In the past, we tried to keep them at arm's length until we had our technology in place. So I want to talk to you about this idea of a data flywheel, and that's the picture you're seeing on the right. The idea of the data flywheel is to start thinking about data less in terms of platforms and more in terms of products that are going to drive some kind of specific value, no different than any other product that you might build in your organization. Now, the data product is going to drive a customer experience, and that can be internal or it can be external or a partner, or it can even be machine to machine. And based upon that experience, we're going to collect feedback. And that feedback is going to be used as data to inform the next iteration of your data product, or even new data products, so that you can continually enhance your customer's experience, whoever they are. Now, examples of that might be something like a customer segmentation model, a targeting model, a collection of executive level KPIs. It could be store level diversity and sustainability data, things like that. This is going to allow you to build your data strategy incrementally, test and learn as you go, and demonstrate value, all grounded in real life feedback. So the interesting part here is that the cloud allows our flywheel to accelerate because we can now more efficiently and cost effectively experiment and innovate with new technology and techniques and adjust or even stop projects or experiments that aren't valuable with a lot of technical debt. Think about it. In the past, it used to take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to actually go live with some kind of data platform. That's too long. Each turn of the flywheel should be no more than 60 to 90 days to create smaller deliverables to test those key assumptions. This includes governance. This agile approach also allows companies to deal with change management, process, and people changes incrementally rather than trying to tackle that at the macro enterprise level. All right, so let's look at an example of this. So Beauty Bay is a customer that we worked with, and they wanted to use data to transform the relationship that they have with their customers. Their tagline is that they want to make every customer feel like a celebrity with some kind of unique beauty experience. Beauty Bay didn't want to build their entire platform up front in the cloud before they started to get value from it. So first, they started with a use case to understand customer trends, demand patterns, and customer segments so that they could test and learn with more personalized communications. Now, the benefits they identified were increased engagement, sales value increased, and they improved their shopping basket volumes. Now, the next turn of the flywheel for that second use case, they focused on implementing real-time demand sensing and pricing, and then scaling their personalization capabilities across channels so that they could reduce markdowns, increase sales and profitability, while at the same time enhance that customer shopping experience. Now, Beauty Bay is in their third iteration, and they're focused on using customer demand data to inform how they buy merchandise more frequently and accurately so that they can match the changing customer taste and new fashion trends while still decreasing stock waste and markdowns. Data is connecting the business and the customer and marketing and pricing and merchandising. They're connecting that whole chain together. And they implemented each one of these use cases in an agile way so that they did it within a 60 to 90 day cycle. They transformed the way they served their customers, and they saw value and outcomes right away. So this is what we talk about when we talk about a data flywheel. Now, as we've worked with companies all over the world, we found 6 common challenges as they try to do this. So the first is data, privacy, security, compliance, and governance. Now, I have never heard a company say that they don't care about these things, and security, frankly, is considered job zero at AWS. And I would say if somebody told you they weren't worried about these things, they might be in the wrong job if they're dealing with data. But the area that we see companies really struggle with right now is defining a governance model that doesn't become a bottleneck to innovation. You know, and when we think about a governance model, we also want to think about not just governing our first-party data, but also how we govern our third-party data. So one example of what I mean by third-party data, we worked with a global pharmaceutical company that was spending almost $1 billion on third-party data, and they had no visibility into who was using it. They didn't know if they were buying that data more than once. They didn't have the capacity or the ability to create buying power with vendors. They hadn't established any governance around third-party data. Now, we're not going to talk that much about that today, but it is a big piece of companies' overall data strategies. I am going to mention one thing. The Amazon Data Exchange provides a mechanism for companies to govern their data, to provide data, to subscribe to it, and to consume it, and to secure it all in one place for over 200 data products and over 200 data providers, and 3,000 data products. Now, the next challenge I want to talk about is how to identify and prioritize use cases that are going to drive strategic value to the business. and then how you create sponsorship and a business case to support the funding for those new data products. So again, like I said, data products might be something like an entire customer 360 initiative or simply a set of executive KPIs. Now think back, if you treat data as a platform and not a value generating product as we did in the past, we didn't really worry about building business cases because we treated data as a cost center. So learning how to do this is really a challenge for a lot of companies. Next, as companies modernize, it's really common for them to have gaps in skills and technologies. And I'm not just talking about technical skill gaps. I'm also talking about skills around things like portfolio management and agile skills to manage data initiatives for really rapid deliverables. One area that companies are really looking to use or to leverage to reduce technology skill gaps is investing in things like no-code, low-code types of technologies. Now, the last two areas are where we're going to focus most of our time today. Understanding what great looks like is not just about having a great technology platform. It's how do you manage change and create an organization, an operating and funding model that align with your key objectives so that you can maximize value associated with those data products. And then finally, creating a data-driven culture. It's more than just having data. Just having data does not mean that you're data-driven. Having a data-driven culture also means that you put a process in place to measure what you expect. Now, I'll give you an example of this. We worked with an insurance company a few years ago, and they were about ready to spend something like $9 million modernizing their customer 360, or they called it like a member 360 initiative. At the very beginning of the project, I asked them, like, what are you doing this for? And they said, well, we want to improve trust with our members. And I said, all right. How do you measure trust? And they said, we have no idea how to measure trust. So before we spent any more time talking about technology, we had to instrument how we were going to measure whatever it is we were going to build to make sure we were driving the behavior that we were making this investment for. Finally, we spend a lot of time talking about ingesting and storing data and big data, but sometimes we forget about that last mile, which is actually interpreting data. You cannot have a data-driven culture if the interpretation of data is bottlenecked through a few analysts who create PowerPoint decks. Anyone who's going to use data in the decision-making process needs to be able to understand that data in the moment they're making the decision. Now, maybe there's like one of these or even two or even all of them that resonate with some of the challenges that you have in your organization. So the rest of this presentation is going to take a look at things to consider when you're deciding what's going to work best in your organization. So a lot of times I get asked by companies to look at their 2 to 5 year architecture plan and tell them if it's right. And my response is always this. It's, well, what are you trying to be with data? What are your objectives? Have you established your guiding principles? And more often than not, the response is either, I don't know what you mean, or no, we haven't gotten to that yet. And one of the fundamental things that we recommend to customers before they make their first technology selection is to establish the key tenets they have for becoming data-driven. These tenets are what serve as the mechanism to be clear from the top down on what the key objectives are for using data throughout the organization. And it's so important today, given the amount of choice in technology. Now, Andy said at the beginning that I'm a longtime data professional, which is true. And back when I started, there wasn't a lot of choice in technology. You had SQL, and some people might use OLAP, or there was very few choices that we actually had in technology. But today, it's really easy for companies to get distracted by coolness rather than by actual need. So having those key tenets, make sure that you align the use of data with your core values as a company and what you're trying to accomplish. Communicating these consistently, clearly, and frequently is going to help the rest of the organization stay aligned. It always surprises me when companies say, yeah, we're struggling with change management, but they haven't defined these key tenets yet, because how can you have good change management if you're not communicating what your intentions are? So I worked not too long ago with a utility company, And one of the recommended tenets we had for them was that data should benefit customers as much as it benefited the company. That was something they said was really important to them. And we said, we really need to establish that as a key tenet so everybody in the company understands what you're trying to do. And this was such an important shift for them as they modernized data. At Amazon.com, when we went through our modernization, and this was not a trivial modernization, it was modernizing over 1 million analytics jobs for more than 50 petabytes of data, we didn't pick technology first. We defined our key tenets, and a gentleman named Jeff Wilkie, who reported to Jeff Bezos at the time, he communicated those through the entire organization. So start there. Now, next, once you have those guiding principles established and they're communicated, you have to ensure that you've got alignment between your organizational model, your governance model, and your funding model. You can't say that you want to have decentralized governance and then have a centralized organization and funding model. The biggest area that I see companies really miss on this is making sure that the funding model is aligned so the organization can innovate at the pace required by the business. I saw an example of this. It was at an insurance company. And that's what they talked about. They wanted to be decentralized. And they said, yes, we've completely decentralized all of our funding. But they still had a centralized organization that managed the, kind of the platform that everybody built on. But that organization had to go around kind of like Oliver Twist did with the little cup saying, hey, can you guys contribute so that we can do things to modernize our platform? And so this really slowed them down. In fact, they worked on their data strategy for over 2 years without having the ability to test and learn. So don't forget how important it is to make sure that you get those things aligned so that you can innovate at the speed you need to. The next thing I want to talk about, this is where these are some of the areas around governance and findability of information and creating transparency in an organization come into play. And this is around this idea of a modern data community, which provides that mechanism within your organization so you can find information and you can use that to unlock innovation and maximize your investment. This modern data community pushes the responsibility for governance out of a central organization to the people who understand the data the best, and that's the producers. Now, a central organization might still put some lightweight governance policies out there, but really that responsibility lies with the producers. And why is that important? Well, I'm going to tell you another story about a CPG company that I was working with right before COVID hit. And they actually told me that they had a 9-month delay in putting new capabilities into production because there was a backlog through their central governance organization. Think about that. There was probably a pretty high likelihood that most of those projects were either irrelevant or the relevance had completely waned after the world changed because of the impact of COVID. Enabling governance to be managed by the producers increases your ability to scale, but still protects your data. Now, to go further, this community allows you to connect your producers of data with your consumers of data to create a community for data products. A centralized team, like I said, they're still there, but they focus less on managing data and more on building tools and automation to support the relationship between those producers and consumers so you have security and compliance, and you can simplify the onboarding and discovery of data. Now, back to the Amazon.com example. Remember, I don't know if many of you know that we were on a on-premises Oracle data warehouse up until we moved out our last workload off in the fall of 2018. So think about that. And we moved from that monolithic data warehouse to a microservices modern data environment. They built what we called, and this probably won't surprise you, we called it a data marketplace to manage the entire data value chain from data collection, storage, discovery, subscription, delivery, and analysis of data to create that community. This was a critical piece in achieving our own key tenet that we had defined of empowering the business so that it represented a cross-section of people, process, and technology. All right, next. I talked about the idea of data literacy as one of the common challenges in becoming a data-driven organization. Now, historically, data literacy has been defined in very manual terms with mechanisms like catalogs and wikis and centers of excellence and things like that. Very people-oriented or people-dependent things. Now, even with these mechanisms, data still largely had to be interpreted by analysts and data scientists. So first, to address literacy broadly in an organization, it's really important that when you deliver data, you contextualize it in a way that's meaningful to the user and to allow users to ask questions in the language of business rather than the language of something like SQL or Python or some other programmatic language. You need to put that information in a narrative that makes sense to non-technical users so they can look at it and understand it quickly. And graphs and charts are still really powerful constructs, but on their own, they can really easily be misinterpreted. So what good is all that data you just collected and stored if people are understanding it in the wrong way? So combining narratives that explain data in clear terms with things like graphs and charts is really powerful. And the narrative tells the story about your business. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, look, it isn't, it's not as simple as slicing and dicing to find key insights in your data anymore. We have too much data, too many different kinds of data. We can't rely on analysts and data scientists to define every model we look at for anomalies. This would create a huge bottleneck to insights. So things like embedded AI ML and predictive capabilities that are available in end user tools are going to be critical so that users can leverage and get the right information quickly. Now, establishing a holistic plan for data literacy right at the beginning of any modernization is a really important step in becoming data-driven. Now, I want to show you what I mean by some of these things. So let's take a look at first, how we visualize data. So in this example, if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, I'm going to give you guys a quiz. Can you tell which part of the body has the highest inflammation rates? Probably not very easily. So not only is it hard to determine what I should look at, and the charts themselves aren't really optimal for distinguishing data values. Now, donut charts and pie charts are fan favorites of people who build dashboards, but they are notoriously misleading. And in this example, if you took the numbers off of that donut chart and just looked at the slices, can you really tell with confidence what the difference is between them? Again, probably not. And if you can't tell the difference without having to put the numbers on, why not just put your data in a table? Now look at the left-hand side. When I visualize my data in context, I can very quickly see that the highest inflammation rates are in the brain for females aged 0 to 29. And I can interpret this data in less than a couple of seconds. And that's critical to making decisions in the moment that matters. All right, next. If you think about how a lot of insights get delivered today and how they've gotten delivered over the past 40 or so years, many times someone would come into a meeting and they had a PowerPoint and they had a chart, but likely they also had that little text box in the upper right-hand corner. And that had the interpretation of the data. It actually explained the chart on behalf of the folks that were looking at it. We have to take that person in the middle out of the equation. Otherwise, we're creating another bottleneck in our ability to drive data to everyone who needs it. So let's take a look at this example. Now we're going to focus today on the narrative in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. So notice that this is explained in business-friendly terms and in context. It's just a couple of sentences, right? The top two anomalies for total sales on December 2020 are Amazon.com and Cisco. And then the narrative also gives you kind of the numbers to support the anomalies. The other important thing here is that we've used embedded ML technology. In this case, this is in QuickSight, to highlight to the user information that they need to focus on. Now, we used to talk a lot about slicing and dicing and drilling and all of that. But we've got, like I said, we've got too much data, even just compared to a few years ago. So using advanced analytics to get the user started looking in the right direction is going to be a really important way to gain efficiency and accuracy within an organization. Remember, Disinformation is likely, it's just the beginning of a user's day, not the end. So what happens next? What if I want to understand a little bit more detail about the products that are causing the anomaly for Amazon.com? How do we make it easier for a user to ask that next question? Well, I want to show you an example of natural language query. And again, in this case, I'm using CDOIQ. Notice, we have taken the need for a user to understand any technical concepts out of the picture. We're not making them do any dragging or dropping or forcing them to understand the structure of a database or what's a dimension or what's a measure or what's an attribute. We simply let them ask the question in the language of business. So very quickly, a user can ask, show me sales by products for Amazon.com. Now, this technology also can help the user construct the question as they go, giving hints all along the way based on both the data values and on the metadata that's available. The system also should learn, right? So for instance, you see that anytime you allow natural language search, you know what you're going to get? You're going to get typos. So notice in this example, there's a typo in the question. But Q is going to prompt the user with suggestions or just let them correct the error. It'll then ask if the user wants to save that typo or reference as a synonym for the word product, because they're probably going to spell it wrong again sometime in the future. Now, these three things are just a couple of ideas on how to start to drive literacy deeply in your organization using automation, using AI ML, and taking that bottleneck that's dependent on people out of the middle. Now, a really great example of a customer creating data that's delivered to users across their entire ecosystem is the NFL. And this includes 32 clubs in their league and their broadcast partners, where it has to be really easy to understand and interpret data. And that data has to have insights immediately available in real time. Remember, this is data that they're looking at during a game. So this is an example of how thinking about literacy of data can really transform our experience, and doing that right up front. Now, I want to leave you some other examples, because according to Richard Joyce at Forrester, just a 10% improvement in data accessibility sees a $65 million increase in income for a typical Fortune 1000 customer or company. At AWS, we see customers disrupting industry, creating new markets, and creating highly differentiated value propositions with data. And these are just, what you're seeing here are just a couple of examples. We see that in order to do this requires more than just a focus on technologies. All of these customer examples that you see here have a different approach to mindset, people, process, and technology. Now, to help you get started on whatever, wherever you are in your journey, AWS has created several programs, but I thought I'd share information about this one called the Data-Driven Everything Program, or DDE. So this is a modular program to help you accelerate, again, no matter where you are in your journey. So if you need help aligning your business and your technology executive stakeholders around those high priority business use cases that are going to drive your strategic objectives, then the Mindset Workshop might be a good place for you to start. The People and Process Workshop is designed to help you focus on defining the right organization and operating model to support your data strategy. The Technology Workshop examines near-term priorities to help you identify what is that right technology foundation that's going to let you scale as your business objectives change. And then finally, to test and learn, you use a strategic use case or some kind of initiative, and we take that and we refine the vision, and we actually create a plan to execute in 60 to 90 days. We've worked with customers on our Mobilize workshops, all the way from border security to customer 360 to improving manufacturing processes for cell therapy and cancer treatment. This program, it provides a framework to help companies align business and technology leadership to create compelling long-term visions, MVP scopes, to test and learn quickly with a fast production-ready deliverable, and a roadmap for continuous innovation with a plan to scale over time. So this and other programs represent AWS's investment into our customers, because you can get started with DDE free of charge. So as an example, when Eurosport had the idea for a new championship, they started with a DDE mobilized workshop, and they worked backwards from the customer to prioritize the most compelling features and a vision that would create an immersive race experience for the launch. The feedback generated by fans viewing and interacting with the race, whether it was in the velodrome or on screen or in the app, continuously informed new features and insights to optimize the viewing experience. The intention is to grow the fan community as the championship scales across their base of 130 million viewers, and also to unlock new customer segments. Having a product mindset around data really influenced Eurosport's organization, their processes, and the way that they built and deployed these capabilities. So finally, remember, focus on as much on people and process as you do on technology in your journey to become data-driven. So with that, we'll check and see if we have any questions.
We're pretty much at full time. Maybe one question from the audience was, what are the key geo considerations of building a global modern data strategy?
I think those are going to depend. It's a good question. I think from a geo perspective, it's going to depend on the use case. Some use cases are going to have regulatory considerations that you're going to need to take into account. Some are going to have like specific places where you can actually store data. So again, that's going to be very use case dependent. It's one of the most important reasons why you want to work backwards from the outcome that you're trying to achieve before you start to pick technology, because those requirements are really going to dictate what you need to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Really appreciate the thoughts. Such a great presentation. All the, principles, you've summed it up so well. All the things that we've all learned in the last 30 years, really inspirational. And we're going to wrap up for today and look forward to the first session in track 6, first thing tomorrow morning at 8:30. And thanks again, Amy. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Andy.